Okay, welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting on the 19th of August. Welcome staff and councillors and members of the public who will be viewing in. I'll open the meeting with the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on today and pay my respects to both elders past and present, and also that respect to any Torres Strait or Aboriginal people here today. Apologies, we have an apology from Councillor Whipper.
I'll move that way, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin and secondly Councillor Turlin. Any discussion? Put it all in favour, against carry. Oh, is that Councillor Turlin?
He is present, so he has time off.
Or is that Councillor Scandon? Councillor Scandon?
Me. Oh, I'm just seconding it. That's fine. Thank you.
McLaughlin and Scandon. Okay, so we have adoption of the previous minutes. They've been to council, but for the record, somebody like to move that way. Somebody move the previous minutes. Move Councillor Andrews and Nelson. Put them all in favour, against carried. So we move on to the agenda report, and it's any declarations of interest.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scandon.
And could the staff just email me the form? Yes, just on the matter of the Renwick fees, my family owns a property in Renwick, so less than significant, non-pecuniary.
It is with fees and charges, you do not have to declare an interest. So that's all right. You don't have to fill out one. You can if you wish, but it is not required.
The Act specifically says it's not required.
Yeah. Not required. So we move to any other declarations of interest. We move to item 6.1, proposed fees and charges schedule Renwick Community Centre, and I'll ask Mr. Mooney to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Good morning, councillors. This is the first report of 6 reports to be presented to today's Finance Committee. It relates to the proposed fees and charges schedule for the newly built or the currently being built Renwick Community Centre. The Renwick Community Centre is anticipated to open for community use in the latter part of 2020 or early 2021, depending on current construction timelines. The proposed fees and charges have been prepared on the basis of the fees and charges applied to comparable facilities, namely East Bowral Community Centre and Canyon Lee Hall. A detailed listing of the proposed fees and charges is provided on page 6 of the agenda. Councillors, the proposed fees and charges will be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days, after which a further report will be brought back to council outlining the feedback received during the public exhibition period. Happy to answer any questions you may have, councillors.
Any questions? Councillor McLaughlin, then Councillor Scandon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mooney, with regard to these fees, given that, you know, we're under a COVID situation and numbers could be drastically reduced for functions and weddings and so like, could we not have a reduction in the fee until we get back to normal times? It just seems like, I think it was $880 for the day or something. It seems like, and maybe we have just an introductory offer in this period until we get back to normal.
Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, you'll be aware that you adopted a report, a range of financial relief measures relating to COVID-19 in early April. Those measures were put in place for a period of 6 months. It's officer's intention at this point to bring a further report back to council during September regarding the current situation with COVID and the relief measures that are currently in place. That, councillors, is something that you may wish to consider when that report is presented in September.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mooney. So in other words, that we will be looking at something that along the lines further on. So yeah, that's good. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett, then Councillor Turlin.
Oh, two things. Following on Councillor McLaughlin, yes, look, fees and charges. Could I encourage Mr. Meany to also include sports ground fees and charges in that review, because there's quite a lot of hurt out there for associations and the like.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as I've mentioned, the acting general manager is is acutely aware of certain areas of the community that have been impacted by COVID-19. A further report will come back to council in September, outlining what recommendations we believe are necessary to deal with the current COVID situation.
The council has made it very clear in the past that whilst sporting activities are curtailed or are not operating as normal, there's no intent to charge the normal fees. I've made that very plain. And we haven't charged any fees up until the 30th of June for the first part of the financial year, or sorry, the last part of the last financial year. And I would suggest to you that when we deal with the report in September, we're getting the same recommendation.
Thank you, Barry. And the second question is, what is the management proposal for this community centre? Is it community management like East Barrel?
Mr. Burney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, we've essentially treated this as a two-step process. We felt it was necessary to get the fees and charges out on public exhibition as a starting point. Beyond that, what we will be doing is we will be calling for an expression of interest for regular hall hire users of the facility. It's our intention for the first 6 to 12 months to get an understanding for how the hall is to be utilised and by which regular hirers before we bring back to council any formal recommendation on the longer term management and whether that be via a 355 management committee or other means. But it's important that we understand how the hall is utilised before we bring back any recommendation to council.
So in the short term, Council Scandrett, it'll be managed by council staff in terms of the bookings. We are going to have a look at a more holistic level at the resourcing around managing our premier halls and facilities. I mean, the Barrel Memorial Hall is going to have a major refurb next year. Once that's opened, we're going to have a look at how that's going to be managed. So it's something I think we need a little bit of time just to get a more holistic picture of how we manage some of these facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. I think the community are very well placed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, just a supplementary. It seems funny that we're going out to the community telling them what all the charges are, and then we're coming back with a report to look at what we're going to do under COVID. So how does the community know that they're going to be reassessed under this period while we're in the COVID situation?
Mr. Burney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the fees, what we put forward at today's meeting is the fee structure that we believe should be introduced on the longer term. The facility isn't open yet, and the reality is that COVID is more likely to curtail our ability to provide access to the facility rather than have issues around actually providing a subsidised fee. We'll be guided, as we are with all of our facilities, by the New South Wales Public Health Guidelines. Our major concern and our major issue to date regarding COVID is having people being able to access facilities, not necessarily what we're charging them.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a recommendation there. Does anybody like to move it? Councillor Turlin. Moving it, seconded Councillor. Oh, question, Councillor Turlin. You're on mute, Councillor Turlin. Councillor Turlin.
Okay, the area of the fees and charges. This relates to a voluntary planning agreement for the building work out there, does it not, Mr. Pepping?
Voluntary planning agreement with Renwick.
Through the chair, the facility was built as part of the voluntary planning agreement by Landcom, and it will be transferred across to council as a council asset once it's completed and council's satisfied with the development.
Yeah, See, but what you've got here in this report is you've got the fees and charges for Renwick Community Centre. But then on page 6, we go into Canyon Lee, Barrel. Are you trying to say that you're relying to the same level as the East Barrel and the Canyon Lee Hall? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, yes, that's correct. What we've done is we, in the absence of having any utilisation data, because it is a new facility, we are using East Barrel and Canyon Lee as comparable facilities because we believe that they are of a similar nature in terms of Canyon Lee being a highly desirable wedding venue in terms of what council provides, and also East Barrel in terms of its high utilisation by programmed and planned groups, that they are the most appropriate, similar and like facilities to base the fees and charges of.
Okay, but Canyon Lee was actually built by the people in Canyon Lee, not by council by memory, by the Quigs.
No, you're right. That was built by, Horace Quigg had a huge amount of input in that with the community. But we are discussing fees and charges as opposed to the building of facility. We're just doing fees and charges, putting it out on exhibition and asking for public to comment.
But haven't we already done our fees and charges before? So why are we putting this up as a Renwick difference? It's just fees and charges for any of the halls.
Mr. Mooney?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Correct, councillors. We have placed on public exhibition our 2021 fees and charges, and they were adopted by council in early July. Councillor, we can put forward recommendations at any time throughout the year to make amendments to fees and charges. That's permissible under the Local Government Act and is often required by council. The case is here is that when we were preparing the 2021 budget, we didn't feel comfortable that we had sufficient information to be able to put forward a proposed fees and charges structure. We're here at this meeting doing so, and it's permissible under the Local Government Act.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not permissible, but is it exactly the same as our fees and charges we've adopted?
They're comparable, through you, Mr. Mayor, they're comparable to the fees and charges that are in place for Canyon Lee and East Barrel.
So Councillor Turner, I think if I understand your question, what you're asking is why are we adopting another set of fees and charges for the Renwick Community Centre? The reality is we set a range of fees and charges for different halls and facilities across the Shire. So there's not a common fee or charge for all of our halls. It depends on their usage, it depends on the facilities that are available. So there are similar groupings of fees and charges for similar types of facilities across the Shire. So this is a new facility, and what we're saying is it is similar in nature to the East Barrel Community Centre, so we're aligning the fees to something similar. But at the end of the day, it's still a unique facility with its own unique services and facilities available out there that may be different to East Barrel, for example. When there's not too many weddings held in East Barrel that I'm aware of, or I'm not seeing one. So we've used Canyon Lee as the benchmark there because that's where we do get a number of weddings held, and there's a possibility that this facility could host a wedding because of the venue that's there. So we've tried to align the fees and charges with those two centres to give parity. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but my question is this. In East Barrel, it's always been a problem with parking, and it's a very small building in reality, and it's around the residential area. Canyon Lee is in the middle of the bush with a 70-person hall. So how many people can actually fit in the Renwick Hall compared to Canyon Lee? But the biggest thing is you're in direct competition with the general public in weddings and other functions, but you also in probably the biggest area in Renwick that will use this building and pay a pretty cheap rate for a wedding function for $880.
Councillor, if you're not happy with the fee, we can change it. At the end of the day, this is a fee structure that we've come up with. If councillors have a view that these fees need to be looked at, happy to have that conversation. If the community believe these fees need to be looked at once they've come off exhibition, happy to have that conversation. But we have to start somewhere. And I guess we've used the two facilities that we've spoken about as a benchmark. if you believe that that's not a fair benchmark, happy to take some feedback on that as to what we should use as a benchmark.
Okay, Mr. Pepping, how many people can fit in Wenwick?
I think it's got a seating capacity of about 80.
70, I think, in the main
70,
hall.
yeah, in the main hall, 70.
Okay.
Councillor Halstead?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd like to see that this particular proposal is made widely available to the residents of Renwick for obvious reasons. So from that point of view, I'd like to think that the staff there can organise some sort of letterbox drop because I'd suggest you in the normal run of events, you probably find 5% of people see something like this either on the YouTube or, you know, on other sort of media. But it's essential that the people of Renwick get the say because after all, it's in their area and the majority of the usage will be by them, I would think. That's one issue. Second one is I certainly am a great advocate of there being an alternate to the private sector. I don't have any problem with the private sector operating to do what they do with weddings, etc. But I think there's always a need for venues such as even some of the remote ones already mentioned and one like this, which I think looking at the plans will be an ideal location for all sorts of public meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. I think your comment about making sure that it's advertised.
We'll take that on board, Councillor Halstead, and a letterbox drop out there is something that, you know, there's 600 blocks out there. It's not something that, you know, is beyond the scope of us doing fairly easily.
So,
Mr. Paul, you'll need to send it to the absentee owners.
I'm talking about a physical letterbox drop.
Yes, and when there's no letterbox, Mr. Paul, you'll need to send it to properties at the registered address, wherever that is.
All right, I hear you.
we will do with point 3 can be added that a letterbox drop or advertising to the residents of Renwick be undertaken during the exhibition period.
Mail out, please, Mr. Mayor.
Look, councillors, I welcome the recommendation. It's not really necessary. It's going to happen. So.
Well,
All right,
Mr.
you
Paul,
have Councillor Halstead as your suggestion. Okay, would somebody like to move that? Councillor Halstead and McLaughlin. Is there any discussion? Put it, all in favour? Against? Carry. All right, we move over to 6.2, which is the, I had 6.2 and I came back off. Rates and charges write-off for the 2019-20 financial year. Mr. Mooney.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, the purpose of this report is to advise Council of the rates and charges to be written off as permitted under the Local Government Act for the 2019-20 financial year. Councillors, under clause 131 of the Local Government General Regulations, the General Manager is required to advise councillors of all balances written off for the previous financial year. The report presents the amount to be written off under specific sections of the Act, including postponed rates, pensioner rebates and rates and charges. It also outlines the balances to be written off in accordance with council policy, such as water determinations and low water pressure. Councillors, the amount to be written off as a result of the postponement of rates is $20,285. Property owners can apply for the postponement of part of their rates where its value for rating purposes differs from its permitted use as a result of zoning under a planning instrument. The discounted value, referred to as the attributable value, is written off in the 6th year, and that is what represents the $20,285. Councillors, the amount to be written off as a result of pensioner rebates is $1.631 million. As councillors are aware, council is entitled to claim a rebate of 55% from the New South Wales State Government. The total amount claimed for the 2019-20 financial year from the State Government was $897,000. The net cost in subsidising pensioner rebates for the 2019-20 financial year was $734,000. Councillors, with respect to the other significant categories of write-off balances, the total amount written off in accordance with council's water determination policy for the 1920 financial year was $58,660, which is marginally higher than the previous year, $49,000. Special allowances provided to hospitals amounted to $36,252, whilst allowances provided to residents who are currently undergoing home hemodialysis total $1,530. Council's a revised policy position which deals with water determinations and rebates is currently being developed, and it is anticipated that it will come before council for consideration in its October Finance Committee meeting. Councillors, the amount proposed to be written off through sundry debtors is $9,473. These accounts have been identified as being unrecoverable through council debt recovery procedures. A list of sundry debtors amounts proposed to be written off is provided as attachment 2 to this report. In summary, the total amounts of rates and charges to be written off presented in this report is 1,758,958. These amounts have been considered as part of the budget process and will have minimal impact on the year-end result for the 1920 financial year, which will be presented to the October Finance Committee meeting. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Any councillor Scandra? And then councillor Turley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mooney, and a small correction on page 15. I think it should read the 2019/20 rating year up the top. Could you just make some general comment about those?
Councillor Scandra,
Just point of clarification.
a clarification in your first part of the question.
Point of clarification there, Mr. Mayor, that year there, 2014-15 rating year is correct, because that is the 6th year that we are currently writing off in the 1920 financial year. So technically, that statement is correct. It is the 14-15 year that we're writing off.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Maybe a footnote to that effect. Could you just make some comment on those write-offs? And secondly, could you then make some comment about the debtor account write-offs by type? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, can I just see clarification as what the first part of the question was there, please? It just popped out of it.
Oh, Mr. Mooney, just some comment on the type of rate write-offs. It looks like it's mostly water charges. Is that what I'm reading? Attachment 1.
Some of it's.
So there are no rate write-offs, councillors. There's some accrued interest adjustments that we've done under delegation, totaling $515. And there are no rate write-offs included within this report.
Water rates, Mr. Mooney, attachment 1. Could you make some comment on those, please? Are they mostly leakages? Is that what it looks like?
Councillor, attachment 1 deals with postponed rates. There is no water charges contained within attachment 1. That is specifically for rates, and that is for the postponement of rates.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. And in terms of attachment 2, what was the major problem there? Can you just comment on that? Was it basically we didn't get to them before they disappeared, or they disappeared long gone?
Not through you, Mr. Mayor. Not a case of getting to them before they disappeared. Unfortunately, we do find on a year-to-year basis that businesses do shut up very quickly, particularly around food shop inspections. Businesses can be operating one day and then the following weekend they're shut up and have disappeared. We have very robust debt recovery measures that we undertake through our third-party debt recovery agency that uses a variety of means to attempt to locate the business owners. In some cases, we are able to locate those businesses and pursue any debt recovery through the courts. The accounts that have been presented to you for write-off have been through those processes, and unfortunately we have not been able to ascertain the location of the previous property owners.
Okay, it's an annual process that we go through, and it's been going on forever. Councillor Turley.
As we know.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Tell me what business doesn't have that.
Councillor Turley, you are on mute.
The pensioner rebate, is that for self-funded retirees or is it just for pensioners that are on pension? whatever. How does that work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's for those property owners who have a valid pensioner card, and in some cases where they are veterans or war widows of veterans as well.
So
they
not
have-
the, sorry,
So they have to be holders of those cards.
so it can't be a self-funded retiree.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, councillor.
Okay, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Is it, sorry? Sorry?
Thank you.
No. And on page attachment 216, the lease terminated, it's 12225. Is that a council property that's terminated the lease? 500, sorry, I've marked the wrong. Yeah, no, 500.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct, councillor. That was an arrangement that council had approved for a community garden. After 2 years of trying to make contact with the lessees and to no avail, we wrote to the Community Garden Association and made them aware that we'd be terminating the lease in accordance with the conditions of the lease. As such, we've had to write that debt off at the same time.
Yeah, the second one from the top of $2,000 odd, it's the water meter service. How come, let's say it's gone into administration? Is that what you're saying, is you can't get any money off the administrator for those funds?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, councillor, where businesses have gone under administration and there is an ability for us to recover some of the costs, we take every step to do so. And at some stage in the future, there potentially can be an opportunity for us to write some of this revenue back. However, the advice that we sought from our legal representatives is that the likelihood of there being any form of return payable, as most councillors would be aware when matters like these go under administration, it's very minimal. So it's prudent at this stage for us to write the debt off. If at some stage in the future we recover a percentage of the debt, then that's a good outcome for council.
You know, I think what I'm trying to get at is that, for instance, the water meter service, the landowner, not the tenant. So it's the landowner of the property that's gone broke into receivership. The one above it, the food shop inspections, that is usually the tenant, not the owner. So there's two different ones there. One's a tenant and one's the owner. So the 2183, you've written off the water, but are they paying their rates as well at the same time? Or have they gone totally on administration?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice, but one clarification I would make there is that a property owner can also be running the business as well, councillor.
No, I get that.
The property's tenanted, but I would have to take that on notice in terms of the detail. I'd have to also be cautious around council's privacy, around to what extent we would be able to release that information in open council.
I don't want it released to me. I'm just flagging the owner gets the water rates and passes on to the tenant. And the owner doesn't get the food inspection. That usually is either the owner or a tenant, but most of the time it's a tenant. Anyway, okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McLaughlin. You're muted, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this one always is close to your heart with regard to writing off so much money for our pensioners with regard to their rates and so forth. I was just wondering if this is something, how does our LGA compare with other LGAs? Are we a burden more than most, and I was wondering if we go through our JO to put pressure on the state government to fully compensate council for the discrepancy. I know you've been chasing this for years, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to take that question in two parts. And the first part I'd have to take on notice. I don't have information available to me right now, which provides a comparison of the burden on the Shire in terms of the pension rebates that we offer. The second part, I can easily answer that question, Councillor McLaughlin. As you would be aware, IPART undertook a review of the rating framework upon direction by the State Premier. The outcome of that review was released some 18 months ago, and the state government actually formally responded to the recommendations made by IPART earlier this year, if memory serves me correct. Councillor, any changes to the current pension rebate concession scheme has been taken off the table by the state government, despite there being numerous recommendations made via LGE, NSW and various councils as part of IPART's review. That's not to say that obviously council can continue to lobby and advocate for a greater either a greater proportion of the pension rebate to be covered by the state government, or for an increase in the level of pension rebate offered to pensioners. Again, of course, council's preference would be for the state government to cover that. But the reality is that that review has now been completed. The state government has made its position clear regarding the recommendations. It's highly unlikely that that position is going to change in the short to medium term.
Councillor,
Thank you. One more,
just to add
just
to
one
that,
more if I could.
Yeah, just hang on 1 second, councillor.
Yep.
Councillor, we've written to the state government a number of times over the last 19 years that I've been here about pensioner rebates, and the standard response we get back is, council, you can write off whatever rates you like, it'll come out of your coffers.
Right.
That's the response we've got.
Yeah, fair enough. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Paul, with regard to, I notice there's a small amount of money that's written off for low pressure, water pressure. What do we do in that circumstance when people claim it? Do we endeavour to get their pressure back up once we know that there is a problem?
Well, a couple of things. There is a concession available where pressure doesn't meet the minimum standard, and that's what that is, that we're writing off. The alternative is that some property owners install their own localised pressure pump to increase the pressure of their water supply. We look at our water network holistically every year in terms of where we have issues, and we're constantly planning to improve that network, whether it be for water quality, pressure, or to meet obviously new demand. So, but there are some parts of the Shire, obviously, where people live geographically or topographically on, very high points of the Shire. It's very difficult to get, pressure there to a level where it's probably meets the standard on occasion. So we can't do any more than, and as I said, offer that concession, and those landowners, as I said, often take their own steps to install pressure pumps.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Paul.
All right, we have a recommendation there, councillors.
Move that way.
Move councillor McLaughlin, seconded councillor Halstead. Put that, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We go to 6.3, revolving energy fund annual report. Now, Mr. Arthur is in the waiting room downstairs or wherever he is. Are you there, Mr. Arthur? He's coming in now. Good morning, Mr. Arthur, over there in the depths of the building.
Yep, thank you.
Would you mind introducing this, Mr. Arthur?
Yes, no problem. Thank you, councillors. Good morning, all. Look, the purpose of this report is to provide an update of the achievements of Council's Revolving Energy Fund for the 2019-2020 financial year. Council established the Revolving Energy Fund in 2012 as a mechanism to generate ongoing funding for projects that reduce Council's billed energy consumption. Council has implemented 9 energy projects through the Revolving Energy Fund. It should be noted that other energy management actions and projects do occur in Council outside of the Revolving Energy Fund, but they are outside the scope of this report. The report presents an overview of the energy and resulting financial savings achieved for the 2019-2020 financial year. The annual savings is normally returned to the Revolving Energy Fund to facilitate further energy reduction projects. However, as part of its COVID 2019 budget impact statement, Council has endorsed to retain these savings for 1 year to assist with the significant budget shortfall over the 2019, 2020 and 2020-2021 financial years. This is a short-term measure and will not impact the operation of the revolving energy fund in future years. So the recommendation in the report is for Council to note the energy and financial savings achieved through the projects completed under the revolving energy fund.
Okay, questions to Mr. Arthur, Councillor McLaughlin, then Councillor Turland, and then Councillor Scandrick. You muted yourself, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Arthur. Thanks for your report. I understand that the savings are quite considerable, and I understand that it's what you've just said with regard to rolling that money into general fund for the moment. I'm just wondering, given the amount of money that we do save on power, would it not be something to consider with regard to the cheapness of money at the moment to actually go into a position of borrowing money to actually save us a lot of money with this ongoing scheme? I mean, money is so cheap at the moment. I just think it's a good investment if we can save a lot of money on our pumping, on our electricity costs, if we were to borrow the money to actually do more of this stuff.
Mr. Arthur, or Mr. Mooney. Mr. Mooney might like to make comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Councillor McLaughlin, thank you for your question. Yes, that's correct. The current situation in terms of councils being able to borrow at very affordable rates is something that we are, as an organisation, taking advantage of. We've got in excess of a $40 million borrowings funding strategy that's been recently adopted as part of the 2021 operational plan and budget. So we certainly are looking to take advantage of affordable rates in the market. Councillor, the flip side of that, and it's something that both the Acting General Manager and myself have spoken with respect to on numerous occasions, is the affordability to service that debt through our operational budget. Whilst we are in a strong position to be able to borrow funds for major infrastructure projects, the likes including our sewer treatment plants, part funding other projects such as the Civic Centre refurbishment, our ability to service the ongoing loan repayments is something that is modelled as part of our long-term financial plan. And our recommendation, our strong recommendation, is that our affordability to service that debt within current budget constraints is about right. We really don't have too much room to move in terms of increasing our ability to pay additional loan repayments without looking at service cuts in other parts of the business.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mooney. I just see the return on this being, just on this particular item being of such value. It's a shame not to see it go forward, and I see $130,000 is going to be restricted out of it. That was all. I just thought, given the electricity savings. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for your answer.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I just want to flag the point that whilst this has been earmarked, for want of a better term, as part of our COVID budget impact statement, the year-end result will come to Council in October. I have included a comment within the budget implication section of this report. If the year-end position allows us to return the financial savings of $46,700 to the REF fund, as we would do in any normal year, I would suggest very strongly that that's a recommendation that we'll put to Council.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one other comment, if I may. And Mr. Arthur might want to comment on the back of it. Councillors, the big users of energy in our shire are our wastewater treatment plant and our sewer pump stations and our water treatment plants. And we bang that drum every time. And that's where there are big opportunities to try and save energy. And that's really about when we have these generational upgrades to wastewater treatment plants, for example, and we're about to build 3 of them over the next 4 or 5 years, where I'm pushing very hard in terms of making sure that the design of those plants improves their efficiency and reduces the carbon footprint because of the energy that they consume. The other side of it is, and these things don't get trumpeted too often, but for example, the peak flows that run into our sewer treatment plants in high rain events is something we're focusing on very much as well, because the infiltration into our sewer systems is a massive issue that we are getting on top of slowly, and that's where we consume, again, significant amounts of energy. Now, we're quietly doing this in the background. These projects that are here in this report today are very worthy projects. With all due respect, in the scheme of things, in terms of our energy consumption, they are the smaller things, although obviously the Mossvale Aquatic Centre is a larger one. So these are important, but there are things going on as we speak in terms of trying to reduce our carbon footprint in the areas where we use big amounts of energy. So that doesn't always, or it doesn't get into these types of reports, so I just wanted to make that point, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
All right, and just out of interest, you probably read there, Councillor McLaughlin, on page 18, that the Mossvale Civic Centre, once the new roof's installed, will have.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So, Councillor Scandron, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could staff just indicate to us, other than sewerage works, what other potential sites we might be looking at for REF schemes, please?
Through you,
Well,
Mr.
not
Mayor.
REF schemes for the sewer treatment plants, no.
Yep. Look, through you, Mr. Mayor, one of our immediate focus is the solar on the Civic Centre, and there is money in the Revolving Energy Fund allocated for that. So any short-term deferment of repayment of these savings is not going to affect these projects. We also have an LED lighting project with the Aquatic Centre funded, and for the coming year as well. And I might just follow on, just to reiterate what Mr. Paul said, is that this is one of our mechanisms. In terms of reducing energy consumption by council, the works that the amount of savings that have been created through our water and sewer projects over the years is really the lion's share. And as Mr. Paul said, a lot of that is untrumpeted. It's behind the scenes, that's that is through any of our conversions of our pumps to variable speed drives, mains integrity does have all verifiable savings on our energy use.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Could I ask specifically about plans for the Playhouse and Barrel Memorial Hall in terms of this sort of initiative?
Mr. Arthur.
Okay, so in terms of the Barrel Memorial Hall, I know that it is identified in the Capital Works program, and there are it has been identified in opportunities there for insulation, not only for noise but also for thermal as well, and lighting and plant upgrades. So that's part of our Capital Works program. In terms of the Barrel Memorial, in terms of the Mittagong Playhouse, I think it's probably not in a position to answer that fully, but I think it's a matter of waiting to see how much opportunities there are for that. Again, I know that there is a Capital Works budget allocated towards both of those projects for the coming year.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. I'll be moving a motion shortly, Mr. Mayor.
Any other question for Councillor Turland?
Yeah, the Karrawara railway, well, I know it's the railway because my father-in-law used to own it. The land that council has, the ponds out there for the Robertson Burrowing sewage system. We have got that out in tender at the moment, but one of the major things that we were thinking about doing is putting solar on all that land and still irrigating underneath it with, if you want sheep, cattle, whatever underneath, but having a high standard, highly levelled solar system. Are we not going to look at that and try and have two shots at leasing the paddocks out there for irrigation, one for solar and one for whoever wants to use it underneath?
Okay, I'll put that through, Mr. Paul.
Look, Councillor Turlin, that's something that has been kicked around for a little while. The advice that I was being given by the expertise internally last time we looked at that was that the timing wasn't right for that in terms of the economics of it. That's improving all the time. There is an opportunity out there in the future. At this point in time, we've got to deal with the categorisation of the land out there, first and foremost. I will continue to remind public and councillors that the primary purpose of that piece of land is for the irrigation and treatment of treated effluent from Robertson Sewer Treatment Plant. That is its primary purpose. I have to maintain that site and maintain the licence out there. Having said that, I'll say it again, there is an opportunity out there, and I actually think there might be an opportunity for council to explore that rather than to hand it on to a third party. But there's a few things we've got to get through in the next probably 6 to 9 months in terms of, as I said, the categorisation and a few other things out there. So it's an opportunity that hasn't been lost. It's an opportunity that's there going forward. Okay,
just next, as I've sort of keep talking on page 18, you mentioned for 1 year of the $40,000 to go to general funds, but then further on in the same statement, you've got 1920 and 2021. That's actually 2 years, financial years. And then you go over the page to 19 and you say that this is what you said a minute ago, as a result of COVID-19, if it doesn't materialise, the $46,000 saving will be transferred back. But the question is, you've got 2 years here, 1920 and then 2021. So is it 1 year or 2 years that you're...
I'll ask Mr. Mooney to respond to that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. Good question. As the COVID impact statement was presented to councillors, and we were very clear when we presented this, the COVID impact statement dealt with revenue write-downs over 2 financial years. Obviously, the challenge with dealing with the pandemic is that obviously we needed to ensure that we addressed the impacts on both financial years. So that's why we refer to the COVID impact statement as sitting across 2 financial years. With respect to the REF transfer, that is a savings opportunity that we identified as part of the 1920 budget. So we're only stating that we need that budget savings, the savings from the electricity, to be transferred to general fund in the 1920 financial year. However, I'll stress again, if as part of the year-end review wrap-up, there is an opportunity for us to allocate that $46,000 to the REF reserve, that will be something that we seriously consider and will be something that we put forward to council as part of wrapping up the year-end result. That will occur at the October Finance Committee.
Okay, Mr. Mooney, may I ask you then to add into your recommendation exactly what you just said in small terms?
Yep.
As point 2?
We can put that in.
We can include that.
Can you include that? Okay. And then the next question I've got is what's the budget for the Civic Centre solar system? And is there going to be batteries or is it sold straight into the grid?
Through you, Mr. Arthur, can you answer that?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's still being designed. It's been designed pretty much as we, at this point of the project. One of the reasons why it hasn't been sized to date is that the electricity load is changing because of the plant upgrades involved with this project. So the electricity load is, we're waiting to verify what the new load will be before the solar arrays being fully sized. I know that in the revolving energy fund we do have sufficient budget for a wide number of possibilities there. In terms of batteries, it hasn't been allocated. We haven't ruled it out. but it hasn't specifically been included in the scope at this point in time. Again, when we look at the new electricity load profile, it may be something that may become evident. But so far, what we're seeing is that, with the way that we're managing the plant and in terms of overnight use, it's probably too early to say, but it's need to wait and see what the new load profile is telling us.
Yeah, no, okay, I get what you're saying, but you've just mentioned that the solar system will be within the revolving energy fund for the Civic Centre, not coming out of the budget of construction. Is that right?
That's, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's right. The revolving energy fund has been identified as a source for funding for the solar.
So we're probably talking, I would think, $100,000 to $200,000 in solar panels. You've got a 100 kilowatt system in the aquatic centre. The Civic Centre should be able to at least take double that. So what are we looking at? $200,000 to $300,000 you've got in your kitty, have you?
I think leading Mr. Arthur a little bit, he's saying the design is being done. And I think wait until you get the design.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's in our budgets. Now, if it's not in the construction budget, I've just been told it's now in the energy revolving budget, I want to make sure that the money's there either by grant funding or by money put aside. So that's the reason why I'm questioning. We do know that the 100 kilowatt system on the aquatic centre, by memory, was about $100,000.
Mr. Arthur?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, that's correct. And just going with those raw figures, most definitely the reserve does have sufficient. We do have in excess of $100,000 and pretty much earmarked. It's sitting there because it's been earmarked for this high profile project. It has to, we want it to get done, and that's why the money is there. In terms of the load, just very, very quickly, in terms of the load between here and the aquatic centre, it is quite different. We actually, our maximum load is not as high as the aquatic centre, but nonetheless, at one stage we're looking in the order of somewhere between a 70 and 100 kilowatt system.
Okay, so it's about 100. What rate per kilowatt do you get back when you sell it to the grid? 22 cents?
I'd have to take that on notice. I'd have to take that on notice to find out from our latest tariffs.
Okay, so what have you added to the recommendation now, Mr. Mooney? What have you put in there?
We're going to add, Councillor, we're going to add a recommendation that if the end of year financial result is favourable, that we'll bring back to council the option to reinstate the $46,729.31 back to the revolving energy fund.
Okay, it's been typed up now. That's good.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett and Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to add to the recommendation a third point, and then move it, and that was to the information be.
Turland is, you'll have to speak to Councillor Turland on that, Councillor Scandrett, but keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a third point that information be provided to councillors on energy projects that could be applied to both the Playhouse and the Bowral Memorial Hall.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Turland?
That the information being provided to councillors. But you've already just been
potential energy saving projects.
You've already just been told that that's what happened, and it's in the early stages.
I would just like it in there, councillor, so that we can see it sooner than later. We're currently doing design on the run with the Civic Centre. I don't want that to happen with the others.
Sorry. Run, that's not a fair comment.
Well,
we're running a meeting here to go through the finance. Councillor Turland, are you happy with that?
Well, I haven't got a seconder yet, so I don't know who has to.
I'm seconding Gary. Gary, I'm seconding yours. Councillor Turland.
What do you think, councillors? Tell me what you think. Speak up. What do you reckon?
Councillor Turlin, it's up to you as the mover. Do you wish to add that? And then it will be open for debate.
Well, I don't think we need to provide it back to councillors. No, take it out.
Okay, so councillor Turlin will not have that in the recommendation unless councillor Scandrett moves his as an amendment with that included. So is there...
I'll still second the motion.
Okay, still seconded, then we have that as such. Any debate on it?
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor McLaughlin?
I just, before Mr. Arthur goes, I was just wondering if I could ask the question. Private residents get a subsidy for putting solar on. Does that apply to councils as well or not? You have to pay the full freight.
Mr. Arthur?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, look, we are entitled for any of those certificates as well. So we do get those discounts available.
Oh, it's subsidised. Thank you. That's good. Yep. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Arthur? Then I've put the recommendation as we got three, Councillor Scandrett, Nelson and McLaughlin and Turlin. You've all got, anybody else got another question? Because I'll put the recommendation. No? Okay. All in favour of the recommendation is moved by Councillors Turlin and Scandrett. Carried. 6.5 budget expenditure, 6.4 climate change emergency. Now, Mr. Arthur is still there. Would you like to introduce it, Mr. Arthur, please?
Okay. Thank you, councillors. This report responds to a council resolution, provides information on the update of the process being undertaken to outline our financial considerations of the climate change emergency declaration, which is made by council in February this year. The report provides information about how we are developing our environment and climate change strategy and the supporting documents which will cover the financial aspects of the response to the climate change emergency declaration. And an environment and climate change strategy is currently being developed as a key part of the response to the emergency declaration. Community consultation will be undertaken as part of the strategy development, and funding has been earmarked to enable that community consultation process. The strategy will provide an overarching objectives and key stepping stones for council's climate change emergency actions. The strategy will cover both council operations and actions to support the community. It will be supported by two plans: the Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which council developed in 2019, and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan, which is currently to be developed. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan will provide more detailed information on mitigation actions relating to council operations, and will outline the financial considerations of those climate emergency declarations. So things like energy efficiency projects, renewable energy projects, etc., will be part of that Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan will contain similar components as to our current Climate Change Adaptation Plan, such as costing estimates, nominating funding categories for actions, and identifying timeframes for actions. Information on the Climate Change Adaptation Plan was discussed with councillors in a briefing in 2019. Declaring a climate emergency acknowledges that the rate in climate change is challenging and that the scale of action required needs to increase to maintain temperatures within safe limits. Once we have these plans fully developed, we will be able to come back to council with the full financial impact from both mitigation and adaptation requirements. In terms of how we may address that financial considerations, I might just outline some of the strategies that we use in our climate change adaptation plan. And they include things like, obviously there's projects in there which relate to staff time and staff development and doing things. We rely on our asset renewal opportunities when assets go through their life cycle for upgrades and renewal. We look at routine maintenance opportunities. There will be procurement opportunities, so how we buy things, and as well as identifying grant opportunities. We also collaborate with other councils and other community groups. So as I mentioned previously, information on the financial considerations will be brought back to the Financial Committee in the first half of 2021, which once we have our greenhouse gas reduction plan completed. That's it, thank you.
Okay, questions, councillor Turley?
On page 21, total cost of action in draft CCAP is requires additional funding additional to staff time, which would occur as part of the business, usually under $500,000. So it's usually under 500. Do we have a figure that's that $500,000? Is it 250, 300? There's no, it's under, so we don't know what it is. The next bit underneath it says source of funding. 49 action plans were identified solely on the general fund, and 16 in sewer and water, and 3 from stormwater, and the environmental levy contributes 6. So we have plenty of money in the sewer and water fund and the stormwater, not necessarily the general fund. So are you looking for money now to implement these 49, these 91 action plans?
Mr. Arthur?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, a number of these are actually occurring this year, and I think you've touched on a number of different points in your question, which I'll try and address as we go. A number of those are occurring this year, and they are in the operational plan, and there's also actions in our capital works programs which directly address climate change adaptation plan. And a lot of those, as I mentioned, occur as assets are renewed, and as being, as one of our strategies. In terms of the point that you made about the cost as being under 500,000, I guess that what the context of what the wording there is, that those items that would not occur as part of business as usual is under 500,000. So it's not usually under 500,000. It's not business as usual. And what we mean by business as usual is just good business management. So these are things like asset renewal, asset maintenance, things that will occur to make our assets fit for purpose, and do have other reasons for upgrading our assets. So what that comment there is, things that would not occur as part of business as usual is under 500,000. So we've earmarked, obviously those ones there where we may not have funding straight away, are pretty high priorities for us for grant funding. And I know that we've identified a number of grants currently available, and a number of these projects we will first look for, see what grants we can get for these.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin, then Councillor Scan.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Arthur. A good report. I read through it. With regard to something that I bring to your attention, and Mr. Paul has come back to me with regard to this, and I've been banging on from this for years, with regard to some very good uses for concrete in our Shire. But one of the concerns in the report that I've sent in to Mr. Paul, that I'm hoping he sent to his engineers for analysis, is the maybe an action plan to look at replacing concrete in our footpaths with something, because the greenhouse gas footprint of concrete is just massive. I think there's some
Councillor
there's some
McLaughlin.
other options that other councils are doing at the moment. And basically you can only walk around and see where there are trees and where they lift up concrete. You've got all these trip hazards. I just hope that that's something that Mr. Paul will get a response from our engineers going forward, because I think we could save not only on our greenhouse gas, but we can also do a lot further with our footpaths by moving away from concrete. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure whether that was an address or a question, councillor.
Well, it was a question that hopefully that Mr. Arthur can take on board, that it can be referred to him as well, because I think it's important. There are good uses for concrete, but not necessarily for footpaths.
Thank you, councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Scandrett.
Move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so it's seconded by councillor Andrews. So it's been moved by councillor McLaughlin, councillor Scandrett, seconded by councillor McLaughlin.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make a comment?
Graham Andrews, seconded it. Question, councillor Andrews?
Not a question, Mr. Mayor. If I just make a comment, I'm more than happy to second this. When this first came up, you're all aware that I opposed and still don't agree with the emergency, but I note in this report a couple of things. Out of 91 actions, 52 are all already existing, which I'm encouraged by that. And down the bottom, approximately 60% of actions will occur regardless of the climate change and adaptation benefit, as part of good business practice. I know at that meeting when this resolution was passed, that people that spoke in the room didn't believe council was doing anything. So I'm encouraged by those 2 points. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Good
you
point.
raised the point that it is being identified. It has been noted that we are continually trying to reduce our greenhouse emissions. So well done. Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. We move over to 6.5. 2019-20 budget expenditure revotes. Again, this is sort of an annual occurrence. Mr. Mooney, would you introduce, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, the purpose of this report is to seek council approval of the 2019-20 proposed expenditure revotes, which are required to be carried over into the 2020-21 budget. Councillors, the total value of projects and programs which were not completed or were in progress as at 30 June 2020 was $33 million. This total comprises of $19.4 million for general fund operations, $6 million for water fund operations, and $7.7 million for sewer fund operations. Councillors, the level of revotes when compared to last financial year is a favourable reduction of $12.2 million. It is important to note that Council has previously approved expenditure revotes totalling $10.6 million at the December and March quarterly reviews of the 19-20 budget. The remaining balance of $22.5 million requires Council approval. Councillors, as outlined on page 25 of the agenda, approximately 50% of the total value of general fund expenditure revotes can be attributed to 6 significant projects. If these projects were excluded from the total value of revotes, the total value of expenditure revotes would be reduced to $21.5 million, which again is comparable to previous financial year. A full description and comments on each project nominated for carryover has been provided in attachments 1 to 3 of this report. Councillors, in contrast to the level of funds required to be carried over for works currently in progress, during the 2019-20 financial year, Council has completed a total of 122 capital projects at a total value of $18.8 million. These projects have been delivered within budget with a total budget savings across the 3 funds of $808,000. This information will be formally reported to Council as part of the year-end results against budget report, which will go to the October Finance Committee. Councillors, the report also recommends that the unspent balance of the councillors' contingency fund of 28,500 be carried over into the 2021 financial year. Happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Questions in relation to the revote? Councillor Turlin.
On page 25, major projects, general fund revoke, and it goes on to say Station Street, so on all livestock and Berrima Road. And then you go to the attachment, I believe it's an attachment 2, page 49, major projects, and it's got the Civic Centre. The question is, why is the Civic Centre not on page 25?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, I have to answer that question. The attachment that you're referring to is in relation to the next report on the agenda, which is the quarterly progress operational plan report. So, Councillor, if you take the $3.7 million that we spent to date, which is shown in that report,
Yep.
if you then take the $500,000, give or take, revote, you then add $5 million, which has been included in the 2021 budget. That gives you the $9.2 million, which has been allocated to the Civic Centre project. So the $5 million in question that you're referring to is in the 2021 budget.
Well, actually, I wasn't asking that question. What I was trying to say is, why is it says major projects, general fund, revoke, and then major projects, and the Civic Centre is not on page 25 to give us a break-up. Station Street's there, the Berrima Road overpass, livestock.
Okay, simpler answer to that. There is no revote that we have presented, or the value of the revote is much less at year end.
Most of the money's in the 2020-21 budget year.
All right, Councillor Scandron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 25, Station Street upgrade. Could we have comment on that? I noticed that we're waiting for the MOU, heads of agreement.
Thank
Also,
you.
Kirkham Road.
Mr. Paul to answer.
Also, Kirkham Road South.
Councillors were still waiting to have that document executed.
Oh, okay, I thought it was imminent. And Kirkham Road South, what were the unfavourable latent site conditions there, and where are we now with that, please?
I don't know whether Mr. Trippier wants to make a comment or...
Yeah, sure. Councillors, Kirkham Road is still progressing. We're expecting a completion date sometime mid to late September. We have undergone a lot of inclement weather, as you're aware, which has further compounded the unfavourable latent conditions with the subgrade out on that site, and we're still managing to work through that to get a timely outcome.
Councillor
Thank you. And
Sorry, you're right. You're right.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other one is Berrima Road. That delay still there in relation to electrical certification and land acquisition?
Through you, Mr. Paul.
I'll ask Mr. Trippier to comment on the status of the electrical upgrades to start with, and we'll go from there, I think.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Paul. The certification has now been received from Endeavour Energy for all of the electrical high voltage upgrades. That tender is also being currently evaluated to award that works to commence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. And then
So what is the you there? Okay, with the Station Street projects, I remember on page 9 of the next report, there's $1.6 million for the water main and $241,000 for Kirkham Road to be renewed. Are they in both of the budgets in Kirkham Road and also Station Street? Being that Kirkham Road is going to be finished in September, has that water main already been completed? Item 6 of page 9 of attachment 2 of the next document, 241,341.
In response to Kirkham Road, the works that were required to protect that major water main have been completed. The proposed works for Station Street obviously haven't been undertaken. They will be undertaken obviously before any road construction works were to happen there. They're both funded by the Water Fund because it's Water Fund infrastructure.
Yeah, but no, the question is, Kirkham Road will be finished by September. Item 6 says water main renewal. Has it been done yet? 241,000.
What's he talking about?
In Kirkland, no.
Renewal, it wasn't a renewal, it was.
The work-
extension work.
The work's been done.
Yes, the work's done.
But-
The reason it hasn't been
I'll-
expanded as far is because of the.
I'll
way
get
the
that
purchase was.
clarified from staff, Mr. Paul.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm being told the work has been done, but given the way that the project is being invoiced by the contract, we may not have paid the bill, but the work has been done.
So the work's been done. And on the Station Street, do we add 1.6 million now to the Station Street project?
Well, the water main upgrade, as I understand it, is required as part of upgrading the water infrastructure. Obviously, we're going to take the opportunity to do that prior to Station Street. My understanding is that work needs to proceed regardless of whether Station Street happens.
So it's
Okay.
got to be added to the Station Street project cost then.
Well, it's not really, it's infrastructure that had to be renewed and upgraded.
Well, it wouldn't have been renewed unless if you were doing the road up. So I don't
No,
believe
that's
that's
not the
correct.
advice
The other
I've
thing is, what is the overrun on Kirkham Road? We've got an email that came out late last week. On page 26, does the 1.312818 million have the extra money of the overruns?
No, councillor, that's why we've put you on notice that there are two significant issues there that will mean that we will exceed the adopted budget. That is unfortunate, and it's not something that I'm happy about, but at the end of the day, we can talk about that in detail if you wish, but those works will have to happen. My undertaking to you is that we'll have to fund that works at the September quarterly review, but I'm very confident that across the capital works program in 2020-21, that we will make savings across that works program that will allow me to fund that $250,000. And that's a commitment I will give you, that we will across that works program, we will make savings to make that up by the year end. I'm very confident we'll be able to do that because we've got a track record in doing that. As Mr. Mooney said, for the financial year 1920, we delivered $18 million worth of works with about an $800,000 saving. Now that is across the three funds, I'll admit. We had a similar track record the previous year where we delivered, I think, about $16 million worth of work and we had about $500,000 saving. So overall, I am confident that we will make that 250K up across the financial year. If you want more detail about those particular variations, I'm happy to ask Mr. Tripkovic to give you some more detail today.
You've given us a written statement. Mr. Murty's passed that on as it probably came through the system.
Look, the Kirkham Road project, if councillors are not aware, originally we had a project to reconstruct the two traffic lanes on Kirkham Road, north and south. It was a project which was focused on improving access for business into that industrial area in Barrow. It did not involve the, reconstruction of the traffic lane on the eastern side and effectively building a parking lane on the, it didn't involve the parking lane on the western side or the building of a parking lane on the eastern side. As part of the conversational discussions with Sydney Train some 4 years ago, we needed to come up with a solution to increase the level of parking in the vicinity of Barrel train station. So the Kirkham Road project expanded as a result of that to include those two parking lanes on mostly on Kirkham Road South, but obviously on Kirkham Road North, adjacent to the train station. So the project has expanded over that time. And to be fair, that was something that had to happen as the project was being rolled out. The challenges that we've had to meet in terms of services under the ground with gas mains, water mains, sewer mains, Telstra, NBN, etc., have meant that that's been a difficult project to manage. The two issues that have come up, you've had a detailed response in writing. I'm not sure whether you want any more information today, but they're going to have to be addressed as part of the project. And as we've said, it's going to impact the budget by $250,000.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead, then Councillor McGough.
Yes, a couple of issues. Kirkham Road, I'm just wondering about the initial investigation there would have, in my view, shown up that there was a problem with the water main, particularly having regard to what its potential life would have been or remainder of life. So I'm a bit concerned about that. As in, yes, we've got the email and no doubt we're going to have to accommodate that. But I'd like some sort of, I don't want a verbal report today because I don't have anything on the run. I'm just wondering if further to that email that the acting general manager might bring forth a brief report, and that doesn't mean massive number of pages. If you can't write it in page, I'd give it away. The background of that one on Kirkham Road in terms of what its expected life was and what have you. Now, apart from that, I mean, it's obviously a good process in any event if you're doing roadworks to replace water mains and any other services or conduits that may be required, for example, or main replacements, which may not be to do with water, it may be other authorities. I mean, that's common sense, but I think the council needs quite rightfully to be informed a bit more than what's in that email. That's the first question. So I don't want an answer to that now. I just think that should be followed up in some form of, information, not session, for God's sake, an email to us. The next one is Station Street, page 25. Obviously, you've indicated there the 2,334,945. That to me is an indication that the job has commenced, which is contrary to the provisions of the law, and I don't want to go into that. But can the acting GM on that one give an indication of what that's comprised of in brief form? If not, can he then follow that up with some sort of report? Because it's pretty clear that whilst we're not at this point discussing the ultimate re-estimate, if you like, or likely cost of it, I'm imagining that, for example, when that finally comes forth to council, there'll be comments about, for example, the use of the building cost index, etc., in terms of any upgraded estimates. So, maybe the acting general manager wants to give a very, very brief report. I'm not expecting anything in detail here today, but I just want to make that point that that commitment of the 2.334 million is proof perfect that the job's commenced in one way or another.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Mr. Paul.
Well, a brief response, councillors. Obviously, the project's commenced in terms of the detailed investigation and design. That's been going on for quite some time, and we're getting to the point where that work is almost complete. In terms of costing of the project, yes, I have asked for a detailed quantity surveyor's estimate to be produced for that project once the design work is complete. The design work is not quite complete, so that I've got a clear understanding of what this project will cost moving forward before we go to any tender for works, and so that council's aware of that, and council has the opportunity to review that situation.
Thank you. I'm expecting that quite obviously the design is accommodated with that, or I hope it is. I don't think any councillor is of the opinion that you do something without a design, so that's common sense. But it's the other commitments that I'm interested in you elaborating on, not now, but in a report which the council needs to be informed about.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin, then Councillor Turland. You're muted, Councillor McLaughlin.
Beg your pardon. Yes, sorry. Just going back to the Berrima Road project, I heard something with regard to the high voltage design is now complete. Does that mean that's moving ahead with regard to installing or changing the easement and putting those high voltage lines into the Berrima Cement Works? Is that what's happening, and who's paying for that?
Councillor McLaughlin, the advice was that we are currently evaluating the tenders for that work, and it'll be coming back to council shortly. In terms of the time frame, I'm not sure we've got a time frame locked in as yet, but the work is going to happen in the near future.
Okay, so tenders mean that we're paying for it. That Endeavour or whoever they are aren't paying for this. We are.
No, Endeavour never pays for any of these types of works. In actual fact, Endeavour obviously imposes a whole lot of requirements on us that more often than not drive the cost up.
Right. And what about the cement works? Are they subsidising this in any way or not?
No, it's not their project, it's our project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Final question, councillor Turley.
Yeah, the Kirkham Road, we've got 1.3, this is on page 26, 1.312 million. And then we add the water main to it and we add the 260 odd thousand extra works. We've now got 500,000. So then now it's a $1.8 million project. What was the budget when we first started the project? This is Kirkham Road South, but I'd like to know what the total cost from south and north was when we get closer. Can you give us a bit of an update on what?
Well, I've got to, I guess, correct something you said. The water main is funded from the water fund, and it was always part of the works that it would be funded from the water fund. In actual fact, at one stage, the estimate for the water main was at $2 million because there was a potential that the water main needed to be removed and replaced. The water main hasn't been removed and replaced. The water main has been protected with concrete encasement. The water main runs very close to the actual wearing surface of the road. And that was problematic in terms of any future reconstruction of the road. So we've dealt with that in a way that has been very cost effective. And that's been funded by the water fund.
But it's still part of the cost of the project all up. It's actually in
funded by the water fund, as it always is.
Yeah, maybe so, but it's,
Street, Crosby Street, any other project where there are works that involve the water or sewer assets, it's funded by the water or sewer.
it still becomes part of the overall cost of the project, full stop. And it has to be budgeted for it from all up. Now, what you're telling me is that the water main renewal, both in Station Street and in Kirkham Road, are in the forward works or unfunded works at the time, or designed works for the future in the work schedule. That's what you're telling me. They must be in old documents.
Look, that can be a moot point. I've got to get out of here. I've got another meeting soon. I think that one is just a moot point. I think Councillor Halstead requesting for just where that funds were spent in Kirkham Street, that will simplify it as well. So we have a recommendation on the front of page 24. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Move councillors McLaughlin and Nelson.
Yep.
Put that. All in favour, please raise your hand.
All right.
Carried unanimously. We have the last item, 6.6, quarterly progress operational plan. I'll ask Mr. Mooney to introduce this. Ms. Lidgard to introduce this very quickly. Thank you.
Through the chair. Councillors, this report presents the final quarterly progress report for the operational plan 2019-20. The operational plan is a 12-month plan that outlines the projects, programs and activities that council plans to undertake in 19-20. Councillors, this is an exception report for the period of the 1st of April 2020 to the 30th of June 2020. It outlines key achievements and also areas that required further attention. At the end of June 2020, 92.6% of all annual deliverables were on track, 3.2% were delayed and 4.2% were on hold. It's important to note that COVID-19 did impact on council operations, and the report outlines how that impact has impacted on some of the things that council could have delivered, but it also outlines council's response to COVID-19 and also bushfire recovery programs as well. As mentioned earlier, councillors, this is an exception report. At next week's council meeting, you will receive a more detailed report on the delivery program, which is a 6-month report on the objectives outlined in the delivery program for the period 2017 to 21. Thank you.
Questions to Ms. Lidgard? Then we have a recommendation. I've got a question from councillor McLaughlin, then Scandrett. Councillor McLaughlin, then Scandrett, then councillor Turley.
No, I'm okay. I was happy to move it. The only thing I was going to say is I'm very pleased to see we moved on and we did so much under COVID situation. I think to have completed over 90% of our projects in these circumstances, well done.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for the recommendation, councillor Nelson? But we've still got a question from councillor Scandrett and then councillor Turley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 47, Station Street. What works are included in the tender package, which is anticipated to be ready in conjunction with the MOU? And I note councillor Turlin's comments previously about water mains and the like.
Mr. Paul.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, subject to the MOU being executed by both parties, subject to Infrastructure New South Wales greenlighting the project, subject to council being happy once we get an updated QS. All of those things need to be in place. The project will proceed as presented to council and the community currently with the modified roundabout and middle entrance into the Shire. That's the package of works that will be put together and put out to tender.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. That I actually said what works. So, I mean, I'm assuming it's the whole of stage one, including all.
From Bundaroo Street to.
I'm sorry, I am speaking, Mr. Paul. I'm assuming it's all of stage one, Station Street works. And are there any other works that have been asked by others, government authorities and so on, to be added? Please confirm the scope of works, please.
Well, Councillor, you're very aware, because it's been reported to Council, and Council has approved a package that includes an additional 70-space car park at the Middleby train station. That's the only additional works that have been put in front of Council and endorsed by Council. That's it.
Okay, councillor Turley.
He's muted.
You've muted yourself, councillor Turley.
I did. It must have done it itself. Page 45, Business Transformation Program. With the update to the Civic Centre, are we modernising all the internet processes and all the computer processes right through the building? Have we got enough money within that? Because it's an opportune time to make sure the building is at the best standard it can be now while you're doing it up.
Through you to Mr. Paul.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the comment would be that the scope of work includes upgrading the electrical systems within the building, the switchboards, etc., because they are, to be blunt, archaic. So that work is certainly being done as part of the upgrade to the air conditioning plant. The electrical systems are also all being upgraded. In terms of computer cabling and that sort of side of things, that's not specifically part of the project, but my understanding is that there are no significant issues that, I don't know whether Mr. Crawford wants to make a comment or not.
Councillors, in relation to what would be referred to as network cabling through the building, we've addressed that on a case-by-case basis where needed throughout the project, but there hasn't been significant recabling done in that area, only to support temporary movements within the building.
We have a separate connection now to there.
So, in other words, yes, wherever the pointed out councillor Turley to take advantage of the opening up of the building, yes, it's being done.
Look, the one other comment I might make is that with the design of the new roof structure, it's effectively, I guess, like an umbrella over the building. It gives us greater access into what is currently the roof space. I mean, at the moment, there are parts of this building where, to be blunt, you either need to get a skinny a snake to crawl into the roof. Now, that situation is going to be addressed because we're going to have much greater access to that roof space.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, but look, the issue is that the news communication systems right around the world now has jumped a level that is beyond my poor little mind to understand. I just said we're going to spend $6 million on a contract of building work and 9.26 million, I think, is the budget. I don't know what the 2.3 million between the two is, but I'm hoping it's bringing the whole building up to a 21st, 22nd, 25th standard. So it's beyond.
Yep.
Brand new.
Excellent.
No more second.
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
So I just don't
Councillor,
know,
there is
rather
one
than give
piece of
you more
information.
money and make sure that this is perfect, this building, once we've finished it, than having to come back and climb through a roof space at a later date. If you need more money, let's make it right this time, the first time.
I hear you and I agree with you. The one other, I guess, comment I'll make is that when you drive up Donkin Avenue now and you come to where the generator room is there on the right-hand side, you'll see a new telecommunications pole, tower, whatever you want to call it, that's been installed there. So that all council's communication links are now on that one pole rather than dotted all over the roof. So that's been a piece of infrastructure that's been put in place as part of this project, and it's an upgrade to our connectivity to the world. So there are things being undertaken, yes.
All right, we have a recommendation moved by councillor McLaughlin, seconded councillor Nelson. I'll put that. All in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Danielle, for a comprehensive report. And we are going off air. I have a meeting, so thank you all for your attendance, and we'll see you
McLaughlin's become host because he was the last one.
No, damn. John, I've got John. Hang on, look. I'm looking. End. What about end? Okay, hang on. End. End meeting for all.